The Bob Murphy Show, episode 414.
There's a tidal wave coming. What you gonna do?
Get ready for another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. It's your source for commentary and interviews, conducted by a Christian and economist. Now here's your host, Bob Murphy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Bob Murphy Show. Another crossover for you. This one's a fun one. We just decided we had to break out of the box. We weren't going to be responding to other podcasts. We were just going to be our own men here. And we're telling anecdotes that are entertaining, we hope, but also perhaps in some cases offer a life lesson, particularly for you young folks listening. So without further ado, here's Adam Heyman and me telling stories.
Hello there, Bob Murphy.
Hey, Adam Heyman.
So today, folks, Bob had a very fun idea. We're going to do something very different. We're not going to analyze any debates or analyze any other podcasts or conversations. Bob had the great idea that since we're both such experienced and wise fellows, that maybe it would be fun and edifying to the listener or viewer if we just went through and told a few stories, personal stories or work-related stories, something like that, that highlighted some sort of a parable, for lack of a better word, some sort of a lesson, or maybe something that brings up a moral situation for us to chew on or something like that. And I thought Bob, being the genius that he was, had come up with a great idea. So that's what we're going to do today.
Yeah. I'm excited to hear your stories.
I was bluffing. I don't have any stories. No, I have stories. Should we flip a coin? Who should go first?
I think you should go first.
Okay.
I flipped over here and you lost, so go.
Well, how could that process be rigged? Makes sense to me. Biden won too. All right. All of my stories are from the gambling world because although you might suspect that I'm a famous libertarian, philosophical writer and podcaster, it's just not true. I'm really just a poker player who's sick of playing anymore and wants to do something different. So all my stories are from casinos. And my first one doesn't even involve me. It involves a buddy of mine who is an expert blackjack player. Blackjack is that casino house game you see in the pit where you've got to try and get cards that add up to 21 but not go over and beat the dealer's hand, and it's very exciting. And there's this thing that professional players can do called counting into the deck, by which you take a look at what cards have been removed, and if the lower valued cards, deuces through sixes, say, get removed, the advantage shifts over to the player because they get paid 3-2 on blackjacks and they can double down. And it just is a known mathematical fact that if the deck contains more face cards and aces than it does, proportionally the little cards, it's player's advantage, and the other way it's the house advantage. So when people say counting cards in Vegas, that's what they mean, counting into a blackjack deck or a shoe of 6 blackjack decks. So my buddy is just real good at that. He's been doing it forever. He practices. He can count 2 games at once. Just keep track in his head, standing between the tables if he needs to. He can count really, really drunk and does this often. And I've checked. He actually can do it.
Can I stop you real fast?
Yeah.
Is the system, because I got a book when we were in high school and it was like the high op 2 system. And it was,
That's one.
Like I think people believe it means like you have to remember every single card that's been played.
No.
Was it more just like keeping a tally of good versus bad?
Yes, you will keep a running count. Just the simplest one you'll come across is counting +1 for all the little cards and -1 for the face cards and aces, and ignoring 7, 8, and 9 because they're kind of neutralish. And then just knowing what that number is and using it in relationship, that's the running count. And then using that compared to the relationship of how many decks are remaining, that gives you the true count. Obviously, if it's a single deck game, the running count is the true count. And if not, you've got a interpolator, multiplier, divider, whatever mathematical operation is correct.
Do you mind me saying just like 2 more sentences?
Sure.
Because I think this is good. Like we're trying to give people something they can do with this. So just to make sure they're getting what you're saying there, because that's the thing is like when you see Rain Man or something, you assume, oh yeah, if you were like Brainy,
Yeah, what he's doing is not what everyone else is
right.
doing.
And so the system, it's like you can be watching it, and then like so the the dealer like their fresh hand or fresh deck, let's say, or shoe, and like he dealing around, it's like he puts out a 3. In your head, you would say +1, and then he puts out a 6, you'd say +2, and then he puts out a 10, and you'd say +1 because you're like subtracting.
Correct.
Yeah. And so then at any given moment, if the count is positive, that's advantageous to the player. But like Adam's saying, if that's right off the thresh thing, there's 6 or 5.5 decks left. A +3 doesn't really matter. There's half a deck left, and there's and the count is a 5. That's like, whoa, that's really good. So you probably want to bet a lot more going into the next. And that is the thing too. It's not just like it's not so much that it changes the plays you make on given situations. It's just it's more like because also too the dealer, like if you get a 15, you're just gonna stay, and maybe the dealer's gonna break. You know what I mean? So like if the deck is rich in 10s, it can help you all sorts of ways, not just you getting blackjack. Like
Exactly. Except in very rare situations, you don't change the way you play the hands, but you do change how much you bet, given what the count is. And the way the casinos could just defeat this is by shuffling up, after every hand, just to take it in the most ludicrous example. What they do is try and balance shuffling up quick enough that they don't give counters an edge versus just how much revenue they lose by spending too much time shuffling.
Right.
So anyway, my buddy's real good at this. He's an absolute expert, and he can count so well. He can even count the blackjack count in a game, and he can also count in a way that would give you an advantage for the side bets. Those carnival-looking side bets that you see. There's a million different iterations. So he's just really good at counting. And so one night he's just stumbling through a casino, and he sees a attractive dealer at an empty blackjack table. So he saunters on over and starts to play, and the count starts going up, and he's also winning. And then count goes up a little bit more, and he keeps winning. That's kind of rare, because while the little cards are coming out, it's more unlikely that the deal is going to break, for example, they'll make hands. So anyway, it's a little bit weird. But he keeps winning, and the count keeps going up. And he's such a practiced hand at this that he's not glancing over to the discard rack to make sure he knows exactly how many cards have been removed from consideration to calculate the true count from the running count. He knows how many cards are gone. He's just got it as instinctual memory. So he keeps going, and the count keeps going up. He's assuming it's a 6-deck shoe, obviously, because most are. And eventually the count just gets up to something goofy. He's like, wow, this is insane. So he looks over to try and get a true count, looks over to the discard rack, and discovers there isn't one. So he looks over to the other side of the dealer where the shoe is that the dealer is grabbing the cards from, and sees a continuous shuffle machine.
Oh.
So the whole practice of counting becomes moot because the casino is essentially shuffling after every hand. You're counting into nothing, which I think is a funny story. And the parable, the moral to the story is don't assume things. Don't assume that your map of the territory is necessarily accurate. Because otherwise you'll think you're doing great counting into a 6-deck shoe, and nothing of the kind was happening.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the moral is don't sit at a table with an attractive dealer because you're not going to be paying attention.
It just goes to show finding the nugget of truth in a story is not automatic. It's an art.
Okay. Well, since you started out with a quick, I'm trying to remember. There was, because you reminded me of something, and I'm trying to remember now what happened. I sat down at a table. I'm going off script, but because I sat down at a table and shoot, unfortunately, I can't remember exactly what the situation was, because it'd be good to have you confirm to me that, yeah, that dealer was cheating. Anyway, it was a brand new table, and they had like you said, like the weird side quests or whatever on a thing that, and I didn't even know what that stuff was. And I don't go to casinos a lot. And so I was genuinely asking the person, well, what does that mean? What does this mean? It was, like I said, it was an empty, the dealer was just standing there, right? So it's not like I was holding anybody up. I chit chat and as we're playing. And then, I was counting cards, and my understanding is that, they train the dealers, they can count too. And so like, if the count goes up and then you double your bet, like the dealer's going to notice that and know why you did it and stuff. And as long as you're like small potatoes, they don't care. And I,
Just as an aside, I don't think that's true anymore. I think it was decades ago that they expect the blackjack dealers to be counting along as well. But now I just think the protocol is to inform the pit boss when they see somebody varying their bet. And then for the pit, it'd be the pit boss's responsibility, because they want the dealers focusing on not screwing up, not paying somebody wrong or, making some other mistake. There's other things for them to be thinking about rather than trying to count along. That's a mental drain.
Oh, I didn't think of that. Okay. And plus they got the cameras too.
Right.
So like,
Right. There's guys in the sky that can take care of that. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting. All right. So in any event, well, my story, but anyway, the way my story goes, and when I say, I mean, like I was betting the bare minimum, and then I might bet 2 to 3 times the bare minimum. Like it's not like I was
pretty money over. Yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, but the person, he was going, and then, damn it, that's what it was. The person had like I'm making these numbers up, but the spirit is correct. So I had 15, the dealer showing an 8. I hit, I get a 2, so now I got a 17, and the dealer just said 18 and flipped the 10. And I lost, and that wiped me out, and I walked away. And then I was like, walking on the strip like 2 blocks away when it hit me, like,
how do they know?
He said he had 18 before he flipped that card. What the hell? Anyway, my backstory was that I think he thought I was hustling him by like pretending I didn't know how blackjack worked. Like, well, what does this thing do over here? And then I'm counting cards. And I think he was like, oh my God, you can ask me, sir. Yeah. Anyway, that was my ex post rationalization. But anyway, but you see what I'm saying, right? Like 100% is that he said 18 and flipped it. And it wasn't like he had, just for people at home, it's not that he had a 10 and checked to see if it was blackjack and saw it was an 8. No. It was, the 8 was up.
Yeah, they didn't look for insurance purposes. He just bet it. There is a thing where you'll find a lot of dealers just hate the customers. They just hate them. And it's so obvious in their body language and their temperament and everything. And you'll see, this is especially true. I don't know why, I'm not racist, but little Asian dealers would have this thing where when they've got a situation where it looks like they're going to make a hand, if it's a face card, and then they put it down real fast, like and stop, like they're done. Like, there's no way I need another card here. I've clearly just made the hand that beats you. And then they sort of slump and pull off, when it doesn't come a 10, and then pull off another card. They're just trying to beat you.
So are you saying it's conceivable that the guy confident could have flipped a 5 and went, 13, my bad?
Yes, it is conceivable. It's more conceivable that than that it was cheating, because there really is no incentive to cheat. They're just punching a time card.
Well, that's why my extra part of the theory was that because I was asking. And by the way, I was earnestly asking about the other stuff. It wasn't like I was feigning ignorance. I really didn't know what are these boxes over here mean or whatever it was. But that's why I had the backstory, because I had to come up with a rationale for why would he be out to get me. So it's trained well for libertarianism.
We should move on, but real quick, one of the funniest things I ever saw when a guy was counting cards. You've seen people that move their lips when they read a book?
Mm-hmm.
I was once out with a guy, and he was literally moving his lips as he was counting. It was just glaring what he was doing. It was very funny.
All right. Okay, so again, these things, folks, we're just gonna have rapid fire, things to throw at you, and maybe you'll find some amusing or not. So one that was I don't know if this is silly or whatever, but this was a turning point in my life, because when I was young, I was extremely goody two shoes, such that just to give an example, when my dad's friend, when I was getting my license and was asking, he was kind of like making jokes about, oh yeah, Bob, you're gonna take your mom's car out, and because that was the car I was like learning to drive on, and go 85 on the highway or something, and I was sincerely telling him, no, I'm not ever going to speed. Like, why would you? There's no reason to. Like, that's what I mean when I actually thought I was never going to go over 55 or whatever.
That's hilarious.
So I'm just saying, and then not that long afterwards, I was an anarchist. But so I'm just explaining that, and that's like how I thought the world worked and everything. And so, one turning point or whatever in my development was I was at NYU, grad school, and it was downtown, or not downtown, but it was Manhattan, is West Village. If people are familiar, I was in the dorm, and so I was like at the gym or something, and then I had class, and so I had to go back, and I was, I was in the student housing right there in Greenwich Village, and in the dorm I was in was huge. It was like 2 or 3 city blocks wide. I mean, it was thousands of people in there. And so I'm coming up, and then there's just all these fire trucks and other, fire department vehicles and things, and just dozens of firefighters just standing around doing nothing. And way down, you could see a little bit of smoke or something. You know what? I'm not even sure if I could see smoke. I might be inventing that. But I get in there, and the story was, we think there's a fire in a unit that was like way the heck down. I'm on the ground floor in the lobby of, where I would go up to my room. And my class was like right across, and I had to run up and grab my notes and stuff. Like it would have been tricky for me to go to class without whatever I had to grab. And so I go to, and the firefighters are all standing around doing nothing in the lobby. And I go to use the elevator, and the guy's like, no, come on, there's a fire. He's looking at me like, what the hell's your problem? And I was like, yeah, but I got to go to class. I'm just going to go. The fire's way down there, right? I'm just going to run up. And he just looks at me like, I wanted to take out his mom or something. And so I was like, okay. And I backed off. And then I went around the corner into the stairwell, and I went up to my room, and I go in there, and my roommate is sound asleep in the room.
Oh.
When I woke up, and I said, hey, there's a fire, and, I don't know if you want to leave or just stay here. And he just went back to sleep, and I went. And so, and what did I learn that day? That the people in authority. So anyway, I guess you get the point, but then I'm just saying, like, 8-year-old Bob would have been like, well, no, if the fireman says there's a fire and you can't use, it's not safe. But yet it wasn't dangerous enough that they bothered to tell people who were asleep in the building to get out. That's my point, in case anyone's missing that. So
we have a very firm protocol here, and we're not going to violate it, but it might not really be the best thing for all people.
Yeah. So
anyway,
that's what I suppose just related. I'll just do another quick one. A totally different thing, but again, just showing my willingness to just trust myself. Saying, no, I don't believe this. Is when I went to Haiti, like they had the bad earthquake, and I went down like as part of a Christian. No, actually, it wasn't Christian. The thing I went was secular. And anyway, there were like a lot of people, scamming tourists, or not tourists, but like people from the West that were trying to. Why is Haiti in the West? You know what I'm trying to say. First worlders going there for the relief effort.
Yeah.
There were people, as soon as you landed, we're just all over trying to get money from you. And, if you went to the bazaar where they would sell, like if they saw that you were American, they were just right there trying to sell you stuff and whatever. So anyway, when I was returning, the guy who gave me the ride from the volunteer place comes and drops me off at the airport. And I go in, and I'm walking to get into the actual airport, and there's a guy with a uniform on of some type standing outside the door, and he says, yes, are you United States? And I said, yeah. And he goes, yes, to get through, it's I don't know if he said custody. He said some kind of official thing at $20.
Of course.
And I just looked him up, and the guy he was a tall guy. He wasn't muscular, but I mean, he wasn't like some kid. He was a man. And I said, nah, that's okay. And I just walk by. Yeah, no thanks. So I'm just saying, like, for some people listening, like, yeah, no kidding. But I'm just saying, for me, that was like,
little Bobby Murphy is taking big steps.
Because I'm in another country. You know what I mean? Like, well, what if that was wrong and I got arrested or something? You know what I mean? What am I gonna do? I'm in Haiti. My phone doesn't even work probably. So
wouldn't pay the $20 front door fee. How dare you?
Yep. Okay.
All right.
Pass the baton back to you.
All right. My second story does involve me. long before I was married, I dated a girl I worked with. We were both prop players at a casino. And a prop player is somebody who is paid an hourly wage by the house to literally to play poker. Your job is to start games shorthanded, and if it looks like another game is about to break up, you got to move over there and jump in and try and save it. So your job is to try and provide a player pool liquidity a little bit for the house. And they'd sometimes pay people just to host particular games, especially if they could find a losing player with a lot of money who would take that job and just show up every day and sort of do what he was going to do anyway. Anyway, so I was a house player.
So can you just elaborate a little bit more? Like, does everybody who's playing know that that's what you were, or is it like, is there subterfuge, or it's just like, yeah, it's just
No subterfuge. I mean, I wasn't wearing a uniform or anything, but it was common knowledge.
Okay. And it wasn't
just
hurting anyway. It was just literally the games are more likely to last if there's somebody else in there and you're playing by the rules. And it's not
absolutely, yeah. I'm playing with my own money. I'm playing by the rules. There's nothing. Nobody's cheating or anything. The only thing that might irritate a customer is a prop player who isn't rich is probably, going to be pretty good. If he's going to last in this job, he's probably going to be a winning player. But in the particular casino I was in at that time, about half of the props were losing players, and about half of us were pretty good.
And the casino paid you on the side because they knew it helped business to have you there.
Yeah, just to help start games, help save games, help create games. Sometimes.
Last one is the con. What would they pay you an hourly wage? Like how did that work? Okay.
Yeah. And they'd like poach valuable props from other casinos or hosts. Like if one guy was hosting a 40-80 stud game across town and they wanted that game at their place, they'd hire the guy away and just pay him more money per hour. And so he'd come over, and all the people that like to play with him would come over. It's a fairly common thing. So anyway, I'm a young single guy, and I've got this job, and one of my workmates who tended to play in the same game I was playing in, 7-card stud high. She was really, really good, and we became friends, and eventually, somewhere along the way, we started dating. And she really helped a young Adam Heyman tighten up his stud game. Plugged a few holes in my game.
Wait, I didn't know if you were talking about cards or a metaphor. You just linked through everything you just said.
Hey, no. Plugged up my game, yo. So yeah, she really helped me with my game and gave me a couple of good books. Made me a better player. And we dated for a while, and then we stopped dating amicably. But we're still employees in the same casino, and we still play cards against each other almost every day, which is a little adversarial,
Mm-hmm.
And right after we broke up, she got really unlucky because I would just be holding over her on 3rd Street like all the time. Like if she has on 3rd Street, 2 cards down, 1 card up. She has a pair of queens. I have a pair of kings. She has kings. I had aces. She's got aces. I'm rolled up. I mean, it just wasn't every hand, obviously, but it's weird for those situations to come up, and it came up a lot. And it's fairly typical for props, or for pros even, just people who know each other are playing a tight range and playing pretty good. You usually don't target other pros because it's not that profitable. But because we had just broken up, she was just convinced that I was screwing with her. Mm-hmm. So she would never take the hand. Like if I'm raised on 3rd Street by a guy who I know is really super tight, I usually just let the hand go because percentages are he's just not screwing around. But she was convinced I was screwing around, and instead of just calling me down for 4 more streets or whatever, she's feisty. She'd just raise and re-raise and raise and re-raise and build these huge pots with me, and then lose them, which just made her even madder. And the lesson I have for this is just it certainly applies in poker and gambling, and I think it applies in life too. Don't get super emotional such that you misperceive what the nature of the situation you're involved in is. I mean, she could have just folded right away, and not lost. Mm-hmm. She lost a lot of money to be in over the next couple of months, and I felt terrible about it. And she kept getting madder and madder, just assuming that I was somehow just trying to steal a pot away from her, bluffing her. I literally never did.
Huh? Okay. I thought the moral was going to be don't date Adam Heyman. But...
Well, it is an art, and I'm not saying I have the I'm not the oracle here. Maybe you've got the insight on what the moral is. I don't know.
I still think people need to go review. I believe you said she helped me tighten up my stud game and really plug some holes for me.
Plugged some holes in my game. Yeah, I'm sure I said something like that.
Okay, well, I'm glad she did that for you, and then look how you repaid her. All right. I thought I would just mash together some things from the faculty that I met at NYU, and then maybe the next time it's my turn, I'll talk about some of the students. But again, I'm assuming that this is something I would tell on Joe Rogan, but for people tuning into this podcast, then they might be interested in these stories. Okay, so one thing that I did notice that is sort of like a big picture, yes, Aesop's fable kind of thing, is the way what would happen is academics, that they have a paper they're working on, and if it's like they're getting ready to submit it somewhere, but usually like maybe right before they do that, they'll go and workshop it. And so, so there's literal workshops around, and you go, present, like go to lunch or something with the faculty, and then you go and, each department has these, they might call it like a brown bag seminar or something. Okay. And then, so they could do it internally with their own faculty, but then some visitor might come in and do it. Okay. And so it would often like get real combative. And there's like famous stories like in Chicago that it was brutal. And like, just how much they would tear each other down and everything like that. Like apparently even like among economics, it's particularly intense. I don't know if there's some other field where it's even worse, but it's not just academia. Like economics apparently is extremely competitive and stuff. So anyway, and there's the story at NYU was that this guy, who was my micro professor, I won't say his name, but he was like legendary. That the story, the lore was that one time this outside guy came in to present his paper, and you get a thing, and he went, he's putting his slides up because this was like on the cusp of PowerPoint, so it was like they still had the transparencies with the overhead projector, and he put up his stuff. He's got his theorem and blah blah blah, and this micro professor at NYU says like, yeah, what you're doing there in line 3, didn't you assume convexity? And so doesn't that not? And the guy looks at his paper and he goes, you're right. I'm very sorry. He just took upstairs and walked away.
Oh no.
So anyway, that wasn't the story. But apparently that did happen. And like people were, oh my God. So the problem with that, like I noticed, when I'd be going to a lot of these summits, as a grad student, you're supposed to go to these things, and I'd be sitting there watching the interaction. And then after, like in the beginning, when I didn't know anything, and these guys would, oh yes, and so and so said in their 87 paper and blah 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 blah, and you don't know, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, geez, holy, this guy's read everything, damn, And then after a while, as I like read more and more stuff, I started realizing that some of these guys like, no, that's not what they said in their 87 paper, you jackass, you're bluffing, I'd say that, and so over time, and I realized that people had different personalities. And at first I just took everything as just, oh, that's what the guy's personality is. And then also as a separate thing, I began to like I said, I had to get my confidence and get the terrain. And then the more I understood and thought, no, I think I really do understand this issue over here, these papers and this literature. And then I hear these other guys spouting off of it, and I can tell like who knows what they're talking about, who doesn't. And, so I had these independent tracks going on of like the NYU faculty and which guys over time I like, the pecking order, and like, oh yeah, that guy's actually really sharp, and this guy, no, he's bluffing. And then I realized, I had the epiphany that it matched quite well that in the seminars, the guys that I independently had come to the conclusion of that they really didn't know what they weren't very sharp, and they bluffed a lot, and they would, and they would ask stupid questions like, oh, so those are the guys that when someone would come to present, the point was for them to show everyone at the table how smart they were and to try to zing the guy. The other guys who I independently had determined, oh no, these guys, like this guy's D. Like if I have a question on game theory, so I'm going to go hang out in this guy's office and we're going to figure this thing out and that kind of stuff. were the ones that when someone would come to present, they would ask clarifying questions. Like you said that on page 4, but are you assuming that it's a closed set? And okay, I see what you're doing. Have you considered trying that? Okay, that was how they conducted themselves in the seminars, and they were the guys that I thought were super sharp. And so I realized, oh, it's probably not a coincidence. It's probably if you go through life always trying to learn as much as possible from everybody and not assuming that this guy's an idiot at the outset. 20 years into it, when you're, in your 50s or 60s at a, academic institution, you're probably going to be the one that the new grad students say, well, that person really knows what to talk about. Whereas the guys that are, look at this clown, let me show you how much I know, and that they stopped learning when they were 28.
I love that story, Bob. Just goes to show it's, these elements of good character, they correlate,
Mhm.
they stack. It makes sense that you're going to find a bunch of good things. Once you find out a guy is good in, one element, he's probably carrying that in his personal approach to interactions and whatnot.
Yeah. Let me just add a post. Where? A
Postscript.
I was going to say a post-it. Let me put a post-it on that just to drive home the point, folks. Is that what happens with me a lot is, and I feel corny saying this, but you know what? There's young kids watching. Gosh darn it. And we have to reach out to them. It's either us or Andrew Tate. And so the, like if I'm, summarizing something, like, cause that's kind of my shtick. Like I give the air of, I've gone and investigated this for you. Let me first summarize it for you and then offer my thoughts. And so when people point out that in my like ostensibly completely objective, well-informed summary, if I said something, especially that like, oh no, Bob, you totally missed, like, I'm really embarrassed at first, but then like, I just come back, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, so I learned from that and I won't ever make that mistake again, instead of trying to like, well, no, see what I was saying, I'm just admit, yeah, that's embarrassing. Okay, well, I won't make that mistake again. It's like, I like to make Star Trek analogies here, folks. There was, I think it certainly was the Borg, but I think it was this other alien they were fighting too, where in the beginning it was real easy and they could just like, shoot it with a hand phaser, but then it would just keep coming back. And then, then Worf had to like reconfigure to have like these, things with recoil and knock them out. And then finally it was like the ship had to shoot it or something. And
you got to modulate the frequencies, Bob.
Yeah.
About modulating the
frequency. And reversing the polarity is always.
Yeah, that's always the key.
My kids watch the Ghostbuster cartoon one, and it's always reverse the polarity. It's always the answer.
There's something I want to highlight in that story because, again, it's great. There's some wisdom you get from turning from a young person into a middle-aged person or something. You quit feeling like it's a calamity if you're not perfect. Mm-hmm. There's something really liberating about realizing, oh yeah, I can make a mistake, and it's just a learning opportunity. It's not like it reflects poorly on my essence forever that I screwed up. We all screw up. Everybody screws up. What matters is how you move forward. All right, is it time for my last story?
It is.
All right, I mentioned this is a story from the same place in roughly the same time. I mentioned, and it involves 7-card stud. I mentioned 3rd Street in stud, and that's because I don't know why, but poker hands, the various phases of them, the betting rounds, they're called streets. I don't know why they're called streets.
Yeah, on your earlier one, when you kept saying, like, if you were at 3rd Street, like, I thought you meant we were playing at this casino on 3rd Street, and I was like, wait, hang on, where are you?
No, 7-card stud starts at, you get 2 down cards, 1 up card. There's a betting round. That's called 3rd Street. You got 3 cards. When you get your next up card, that's 4th Street. Your next up card, that's 5th Street. Your final up card, that's 6th Street.
Hang on, let me write these down.
And then the river, your 3rd down card, is 7th Street. And I'm going to use that terminology in this story. And you also need to know, because it matters, what a 7-card stud table looks like in a casino. It's either a misshapen rectangle or a misshapen oval, depending on your perspective. And the house dealer sits in the middle of one of the long sides of this, not a rectangle. And then there's 8 seats traditionally, and they're numbered, because sometimes you need to know the number for adjudicating a dispute or something. So the 1 seat is immediately to the dealer's left. And the 2 seat is kind of on the point of the not oblong. 3, 4, and 5 are sort of in the middle, opposite the dealer. 6 and 7 around the corner, and then 8 is immediately to the dealer's right. You get it? Those are the seats.
Mm-hmm.
I am playing 7 card stud high. And then the following hand comes down. I can't remember. We're probably playing shorthanded, maybe 5 or 6 people. I am in the 1 seat, immediately to the dealer's left. And this is a right-handed dealer. This matters. Who holds the deck in his left hand and deals off the top of it with his right, as you would expect, as humans do. So I'm in the 1 seat. The 2 opponents that matter for the story are in the 6 and 7 seats, respectively. So they're sort of on the other side of the table from me. And the following hand comes down. I start with a 3 flush on 3rd Street, and I immediately catch the 4th of my suit. There's some action that happens that doesn't matter. The pot is being built. Once I've got 4 to my suit and it looks like I think I'm live to complete it, I'm probably going to be in for the duration. I brick on 5th, which means I catch a card that doesn't give me any help, nor does it improve my board that I might want to start bluffing or anything, just a non-card. I brick on 6th, and I got to admit that my attention wandered a little bit in this hand. I don't know why. Maybe I was turning around and ordering food from the waiter or something. I don't really know. I don't really know why I sort of blanked on what was going on in the hand. But when I turned back, the action was to me. Somebody had bet, another guy had raised. And I look at my hand, and I've got my 4 up cards, and I've got 3 down cards. So we're on the river now. I'm not really sure how we got there, but I look down, and I see I've completed my flush with my last down card. So I raise. I get raised. The betting gets capped. You're allowed to have 4 bets in a limit game on those.
Can I ask, at this point, you looking at the other player's hand, like, is there anybody who's a threat? Like, oh, if that guy has such and such, then he's got a full house? Or
their boards look like garbage. I'm not worried in the slightest.
Okay.
And so the bets get capped. The max. We all 3 of us, I think, that are under getting 4 bets each. And then the strangest thing happens. As I'm getting ready to turn my hand over, the dealer turns to me. Remember where he is. I'm in the 1 seat, immediately to his left. He turns to me and he pump fakes. Does not deliver me a card. Then he pivots around and deals the other 2 players their down cards. And if you play poker a long time, you sort of develop this habit of not reacting when something weird is going on, because sometimes weird things go on, and you just got to keep your poker face, right? And then the hand is not over. We start betting again. And they're
I just want to make sure I understand. Are you like short a card at this point?
All will be revealed.
Okay.
So my opponents, after seeing me go to war on the last street, they're a little bit more circumspect. I think I know these guys too. Like, one of them worked there, and another guy was a guy I played with all the time, and they know me. Like, I'm a tight prop player. I'm not out there just acting like a lunatic. So I think the guy who, the other employee, he bets into me. The one guy calls, I raise, and then they both sort of begrudgingly call, and I show the 3 suited cards from underneath, and I've made a flush. And they go berserk, because what had happened is on 6th Street, the dealer gave me my up card, and in turn, he gave the other 2 guys their up cards. And then, because he was on autopilot for some reason, he pivoted right back around and gave me my 7th card. And nobody saw this. So while I think we're on the river and I have made a flush, they think we're on 6th Street. And they're like, why is this guy with a board that doesn't look real impressive? Because one of them had made a straight or something, beat a flush, but he pretty hard. Wasn't that hard to see what he had. And so they were just out of their tree. What is wrong with you? Why do you gamble like that? It's so crazy.
Because ex post, they thought you were raising like a madman without knowing you were going to make your flush?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So.
Sorry, go ahead.
So eventually I figure out what happened. and the dealer's pushing me the pot because we get to the actual showdown and I have the best hand. And so it's a bit of a moral quandary. I'll just ask you, what would you do in that spot, Bob?
Tip the dealer on the next hand.
I'll add some more information.
Okay, let me just make sure people at home. So you obviously had a huge advantage, but it wasn't your fault. And then did the dealer made a mistake and then
the dealer made a mistake on
covered it, but
then rather than announce what he'd done on 6th Street, because it's a huge problem. I've taken my 7th card and integrated it with my first 2 cards.
Right.
Like you could argue the floor maybe could be called over and like my hand's dead or something. It's a real big problem and hard to sort out.
You pick them. You're holding them physically.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's because I'm so used to blackjack where everything's out in the open.
Nothing like that. Yeah.
Or holding your own. So that's why the other people didn't realize. Because that was going to be my next question: is were they just so not attuned to that possibility that he had done that they didn't notice? But you're no, because you're holding the card. So how would they?
So this dealer, he decided to do that, and he's one of the best dealers in the joint. He's really good. He also had been going through some stuff. Like I know he was like real tired that day. He's been going through some weird personal stuff, and it's conceivable that, like, if I'd reported this after the fact that the dealer did what he did, like the guy could get fired. I mean, he's sort of helping a guy cheat. I mean, that certainly wasn't his intention. He just screwed up, but he didn't, make anybody aware. And I didn't say anything because until we got to the end, very, very end, I didn't know what had happened. It was one of those things. Something weird's going on, but I don't know what it is. That happens all the time in poker where something weird's going on. So, yeah.
And yeah, when you're sitting on a flush, you're not gonna say, "Hey, now let's get to the bottom of this."
Well, remember on 6th Street, I thought we were on the river. I thought they had their cards too, and okay, everyone's got a decent hand. Let's bet. Yeah, so it's weird. I mean, you probably already know. I did nothing. I did tip the guy a bunch, and then we chatted about it later. Because I thought the harm that would have been done from trying to straighten it out would have been worse than just not saying anything.
Dan Bonjingo says the same thing.
Yep, exactly. So I'm basically covering for Epstein's murder.
Yeah, it's like when Larry David, somebody mailed him a check in what is that? Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And somebody gives him a check and he's talking to his wife or somebody. He's like, yeah. And she's like explaining to him, well, you can't accept that check or whatever. He's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And then he goes, but their checkbook's going to be all screwed up if I just tear this. So I'll just go deposit it.
Yeah, that's right. We're doing the fair
favor
system. It had ancillary positive benefits too, because this other prop, I mean, we're friendly, we're adversaries. He's one of the guys that got, he got paid basically because he was one of the losing players. He had a whole bunch of money, loved to gamble. And then the other guy was just a regular. But that guy told that story for months afterwards about Crazy Adam and this hand that we played. And so I got extra action because he kept telling that story. Because I'm not out there being a lunatic, If I'm running a bluff, it's a well-constructed one. It's not just me spazzing out on 6th Street with nothing, hoping I get there. So,
for the benefit, can you approximate, like, given the information they would have, how reckless would they have thought your behavior was? Like, what were the chance of you catching that, if you get what I'm saying?
I mean, they wouldn't have been keeping track of the cards and knowing how live I was. But I know I was pretty live, but not so much that I'm going to start building the pot up before I get there. It's crazy.
But I mean, am I right in saying you were showing 2? So for the flush, it was 3 in your hand and 2 that were visible.
Yeah, my first 2 cards were, I forget what it was, hearts, say. Then I got a club that didn't look like it matched with anything, and then I got a spade that didn't match with anything. And so yeah, my play on 6th Street is just lunacy. I mean, I didn't even have a pair.
Right. So that's what I'm saying, though, like the probability of, the chance, in other words, for you, for that last card, what was the chance it was a heart? Like, could you ballpark? I'm just saying, like, was it 1 in 10 or was it like 1 in 40?
Closer to, I don't know, 25% or something.
And I guess technically they could be looking at what's on the table and in their own hand,
You-
to get
what-
precise.
You asked from their perspective, and they weren't even thinking like that. I'm almost certain. And all I knew is I had a
Aren't they professional poker players?
no. They're
Oh,
just-
they're not.
No,
Oh,
I mean he was getting a check, but he's not a professional anything. This guy doesn't play that good.
as an economist, I think you and I need to have a talk about what it means to be a professional at something.
You can call yourself anything you want. You don't have to get a certificate from the government.
All right. I think this kind of sheds light on the earlier question I asked you when I said, so when you say the casino pays you and stuff, do they cheat to help you? And you're like, oh, absolutely not. You meant except for this last story I'm going to tell.
It gets worse too. I mean, this happened to me in reverse, where
Has the statute of limitations expired? I don't know if we want to be airing this yet.
yeah, I looked into it. It happened to me in reverse too. We were playing Omaha high-low for the first time in this casino, and one of the guys that I also worked with, didn't understand how the game was played, and he was in the 1 seed, and I was in the 3, and we get in a big pot, and I show my winner for high, and he looks crestfallen, and he looks at his hand. He's just about to throw it in the muck, but he's dating the girl who's dealing right next to him, and as he's looking at his hand, because he's about to put it in the muck, she goes, "Oh no, look, you have low." She's not supposed to say a word, obviously. So he turns his hand over and gets half the pot. So this goes to show.
Okay, but so there, it was just, he actually did have a hand that entitled him to money, and she just pointed it out, just like she fed him a card.
Right, but he didn't turn his hand over, at which point it would have been appropriate for her to read it. He was just holding it up in front of his face and looking at it, and she's peering over and saying, "Oh, look, you have low." She's not supposed to do that.
Right. Okay. Well, skullduggery going on in these casinos.
That's
It
true.
seems every story has to do with male-female fraternization.
Dynamics. That's
Except-
true. That's true. My buddy was blinded by the blackjack dealer. You're right.
Okay, I had a bunch. Let me just try to figure out which one. Okay, this is nerdy, but anyway, there is somewhat of a lesson for the young kids out there.
Before I let you move on,
Yep.
because some smarty pants will probably correct me. If the dealer had caught his mistake right away and not let any more betting happen and called a floor over, I'd said that it was real sticky and my hand could be declared dead. That's pretty unlikely that would happen. What would probably happen is the floor man would instruct the dealer to give my two opponents their down cards and wouldn't allow any more betting to happen in this hand.
Yeah, I mean, not that I know poker well, but I would think that's not your fault as the player that they did that. So why would you be?
There are situations where it's not your fault and you would end up with a dead hand. I don't want to strain my brain to try and think of one, but that does happen.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, anyway, in this particular case, that would be super unlikely.
Okay, let me just tell two quick ones. All right, so one is, and this is the point of this one is to follow your heart. Speaking of which, for the Bob Murphy show, people who follow me on Twitter have seen this, but I just reminded myself of the moral. I was looking at the all-time best, highest downloads. I was just, checking in period. I actually don't follow ratings and stuff, folks, just so you know. I don't. Sure, but it's my finger in the wind. But
Sure.
Do you think I would have this podcast the way it is if I were chasing ratings? Come on. So anyway, and of the top 10, I think 4 of them had coronavirus in the title. Okay. 3 of them had Klaus Schwab in the title. I did, if you remember, I did a series on it. So it's great. So okay, fair. The number 1 most downloaded episode of the Bob Murphy Show was me interviewing Jeff Herdner on the pure time preference theory of interest.
That can't be real.
I'm not kidding.
Do you have an academic explanation? Was this podcast assigned viewing somewhere in some huge?
It would have had to been a big state school and several,
That only gets us up to 40 or 50 people, right?
Even if thousands were assigned that, how many would actually have clicked it such that my thing would catch it? So, it's anyway. But
Does
then
Jeff Rivender have an OnlyFans that I don't know about, or?
I said that to him, and he did write back and said my bots worked. But anyway, I don't even know that he knows how to program his microwave clock. So anyway, that's interesting. So, but here's what the even nerdier one. So when I was in grad school, it's the same professor that reputedly, blew the guy up, and the guy just apologized and walked out in the middle, or at the opening of his seminar.
Hope that guy was okay later.
Yeah. So this guy is the most anal retentive, the micro professor I'm talking about, not the guy that he blew up, and just the most rigorous. Like, I really, when I went to NYU, and in undergrad, it was like, easy stuff. I'd study like the day before the exam, and maybe get a 98 or something. Be mad. Oh, how'd I miss that question? Okay. And then at NYU, like in the first year, about 6 months into it, I was worried I was going to fail out, because it was like you had to be in the library doing homework every night, and I just wasn't used to that. So anyway, so this micro professor was like the most anal retentive and just precise, and it was just good for me to be around someone that was that fastidious about, well, no, you guys. So this is, I'm trying to think. I think it was something like, he was talking about measures. I was in his office, and he said something, and I was trying to like show that, oh yeah, and I said, yes, it's uncountable. And he went, well, no, there could be uncountable cents that are of measure zero. But anyway, what I mean? Like, that was the kind of thing, like he would correct little, things you're saying. Anyway, so I just really, like, I can't bluff around this guy. This guy's like the real deal. And I was like, for a period, like I thought he was the most rigorous, like academically powerful mind I had ever encountered in my life. I mean, that probably was a true statement at that point. But anyway, where I'm going with this story is, so somebody came to one of these seminars, and this was actually for the Austrian one that was weekly, and the guy it was talking about voting theory, and the point of his paper is he was trying to like motivate and to say, like, you need to, we Austrians are better than the public choice people about explaining why people vote, because I forget what his own theory was, but to motivate it in the beginning, he said, there's kind of this contradiction within standard public choice theory, that, they have all this stuff about the median voter theorem and blah, 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 blah. He listed all these results. And he said, but on the other hand, in a model where, you take the assumptions of neoclassical economics seriously, and it's instrumental, and the only reason you want to go vote is because there's a chance you could change the outcome, then in equilibrium, nobody should be voting, or you can't get large voter turnout in equilibrium. I think it's probably the more precise thing he said, right? Because and he said, so I see it's the contradiction there, right? So their models don't work. They kind of forget that when they go and do the other stuff. He just kind of moved on, and I'm just sitting there for the rest of the guy's talk, just like playing with my head, like, no, I think I could build a model where I can get an arbitrarily large. And so the trick is, just this is a quick aside, is so you need some randomization. Like, it can't just be that everybody either votes or not, because the deal is, in case people aren't getting it, if the election is decided, it would be stupid if 1 million people voted for one candidate and 1,000,005 people voted for the other guy. That can't be equilibrium, because all the people who voted for the loser should just stay home, right? But then why would 1,000,005 people, 1,000,004 of them would not turn out? Because we don't need to. You only got to win by one, right? And then if the one guy goes to vote, well, that's not equilibrium either, because then 2 people from the other side would go vote. You get what I'm saying? So, like, that was the deal. And the point was, but you can't the claim he was saying is, you can't in equilibrium have large numbers of people voting on both sides. That's impossible. Again, the assumption, folks, being all you care about is just changing the outcome of the election, perhaps probabilistically, and you assume there is some cost of voting. Like, you got to take an hour to go stand in line or something, and you don't want to do that. Other things equal. Okay. So anyway, I built up in my head that, oh wait, I can build, like, get 2 people on one side for one candidate and 1 person on the other, and they randomize, and I can get a Nash equilibrium with just those 3 people voting. Okay. Because they have to be random. In other words, they each flip coins to decide, am I going to go vote or not? Because it can't just be a pure strategy. Otherwise, it'd be like rock, paper, scissors. You would just keep cycling. Okay. And so then once I get that, then I can just keep adding one to each side. You know what I mean? So, and then for voting for sure, and those just cancel out. And so if I can do that, and I was just coming up with like, so I did a specific numerical example with utility function just to prove to myself that this can work. And then I was trying to generalize it to make broader and broader statements about for, utility functions of this form, blah, 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 theorem 1. Okay. So that's how these papers look. Okay. So I'm working on that. And then I go to that micro guide, like to show him in his office what I'm working on. And for the first 15 minutes, he's telling me it's impossible. And I'm saying, no, that's right here. This is an example. What are you talking about? I'm getting frustrated, and I'm showing him, and it takes me a good 15. Finally, like he's digging his heels in, and I'm no, and finally, at the end of it, he finally goes, okay. He goes, yeah, but this isn't very interesting result. Like nobody's gonna care about that. I think you should go work on something else. And so I walked out there, and I was mad. I was thinking, well, this is kind of interesting because you've spent 15 minutes telling me it's impossible. So surely there's something there, right? So I still wrote, I said, screw that. I wrote it up and everything, and I submitted it to a journal. And then I got the referee report back and said, yes, this is a very interesting result, but so-and-so 2 years ago published a more general result. So that's why we reject your submission. And I thought, okay, fair enough. Yeah, if somebody else published something that was more general than mine, I'm not adding anything, but at least it's a good idea, like showing, yeah, people do care about this. That's why it got published. So anyway, I learned a lot that day because on the one hand, I was stunned that I'm sitting there with the example. And he's telling me this can't be when I was like, no, it's right here, and then he finally admitted it. And then he just switched to nobody would care when, yes, they do care. And lastly, this was his area. I didn't just randomly pick this guy. Like this was his field, like this kind of stuff. And so that's why I went to show it to him, and he was unaware. And so I was realizing, like, that just because this guy, it's his field and whatever, he's telling me nobody would care. He was ignorant of a paper that had been published on that. So just kind of,
that's
anyway.
very telling, very telling.
So there was a lot there for folks.
I wonder if it's instructive for you to respond to a dumb guy objection I'm about to make. Because I might look at that whole field and think it's kind of not useful too, just because, it was all about voting, and none of the participants know what turnout is going to be. And there's all sorts of weird psychological things that motivate why people might go through the trouble to vote. They feel like they're part of a movement. They're really, really mad at the other guy, blah, blah, blah. You've got all these psychological things. So what am I missing that makes this model that's stripped out of all of those, very important attributes? What makes the model useful that I'm just maybe not seeing?
Well, so now you're taking his side.
Yeah, but I already knew about that article.
Yeah. So, I mean, joking aside, that is what you just said kind of lines up with what he thought the people in the literature was moving towards. Yeah, it's like, rooting for your sports team or something. Like that's the way to model. And I'm not even disagreeing with that. Yeah, I don't think it's true that most people who go to vote, I don't know what to say. Every time voting comes, I stopped arguing with it. But back when I actually used to relish fighting with people, I would argue every every presidential election as to why I wasn't voting, and then I get all these people telling me, oh, so you're gonna you're basically electing the Democrat, and no, I'm not, and just going through all that stuff, and why I am absolutely sure that whatever I do in this upcoming election, it will not affect the outcome, and that makes people lose everything. And so anyway, like that's why I was about to say a minute ago to you that, yeah, people don't vote because they think they're going to change the outcome, but I don't know if that's a true statement. I think somehow they view it as like, well, what I'm going to do binds everybody else who thinks like me. And it's like, like some kind of Kantian thing. And I say, okay, right. And so what if my preferred outcome is nobody votes? Right. That's the biggest middle finger. And like, well, no, you can't do that. That doesn't count. That's not going to happen. People are going to vote. I was like,
I think
Which
we
one?
covered it.
Pick it. Am I doing what people are going to do, or am I doing what I think ought to do? Either way, what I'm doing is fine. But you don't like that.
Yeah, we covered a lot of this ground early in these crossovers when you voted for Jesus Christ and blew everybody's mind online, and that was a great conversation.
But anyway, to answer the reason I did that was just it was more of a challenge. Like that guy just matter of factly saying this is impossible. Me thinking, no, I think I could build an equilibrium that works. But and also I tried to motivate that too. When I presented it at the student workshop or something, and I made the analogy with there's this thing in macro. So in macroeconomics, they you want to draw, a downward sloping demand curve and stuff like that. Okay. And it's even, I'm getting all bogged down here. It doesn't have to be macro, but in general, you want to do that. And then there's theorems like showing, like with individual rationality and stuff, like what you could have to be, the individual's demand curve downward sloping. And then there's also these theorems like what would preferences have to look like, blah, 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 to be able to represent the economy by a single consumer. Okay, because a lot of the macro models, I'm mixing various things up here. I apologize. A lot of the macro models, it's just easier if it's just like there's a representative household, and then there's a representative firm, and then maybe there's the government or something like this. Real simple stuff. That was one of the stories I was going to tell, and I decided it was too nerdy. But the punchline was going to be in the models of like the Federal Reserve and stuff. Like, there's no reason to even have money. Like, they just kind of have to force money to be in there because, well, if we have a model about the Federal Reserve, there probably should be money in there. When in the model, there's no reason for anybody to hold money, right? So there's just when you start learning how this stuff works, it's like, whoa, it's a combination. Like, these people are really smart and they're good at math and stuff, but these models are nutty. So anyway, and so in the standard workhorse macro models, there's just like a representative household. And so then people say, but in the real world, there's more than one household. So should that bother us? And so as a way to kind of address that, they also have these results like, well, if they have, I think it was like homothetic preferences and blah, 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 like various conditions that if these were all true, you could have a bunch of different agents that could be represented by a single household for the purposes of this model over here. But the point was, those conditions were all false.
Of course.
So like there was no reason, like it didn't do anything, but it kind of just made them feel better about it. And so that was kind of the joke I was making, is to say, I'm not saying in reality, this is why we have large scale voter turnout and equilibrium, but I'm just saying, I'm showing you a way that it could happen in the type of model we want to use to study voting. And so that should make us feel better, even though it's not right. I said something like, people were looking at me like, huh? And my point was like, well, this is no screwier than what you guys are doing in macro. And then the one guy actually told me, he said, leave macro out of it.
Yeah, that should have been the punchline. This is no screwier than what you do. It just keeps coming up in these conversations. The map is not the territory. And boy, our overlords are running with a map that's drawn and crammed by a psychopath who's also blind.
Let me just tell you a real quick one too. The again, super sharp guy and a very nice guy too. And this guy from Italy, and he took over the mathematical macro because the guy who normally taught it was on sabbatical or something. So anyway, he's teaching it, and he's going through, and there's some, he's got the production function and blah blah blah, and then there's this convergence question, and the issue was, how come like the Soviet Union lagged so far behind the United States? Because the marginal product of capital would be higher. And so, like if the capital stock per worker was lower, so the marginal product of capital should be higher. So investment should have all flown to, or gone to the Soviet Union and blah, blah, blah. And, he said it can't be that, they have different production functions, right? Because their students can all go train at MIT and, our other schools and stuff. So like the production function is the same. And, the labor, blah, blah, blah. And, the labor quality is the same. He's going through this stuff. And it was just this puzzle. And like he had all the equations up on the board and everything, trying to understand why per capita output was higher in the U.S. than in the Soviet Union. In case people are looking, I went to grad school from 98 to 2003. But for some reason we were talking about the Soviet Union. I don't know why. I don't remember why.
Habit.
Yeah. And so, and anyway, and it was just this big mystery. And just to be clear, if he had said, now, of course, we know it's because they were communist, and surely that has something to do with it. But for the purposes of this class, we're trying to mathematically model, and that doesn't really fit as a parameter. And so let's just try. No, he didn't say any of that. Like, the guy was genuinely baffled. Yeah. And hey, and I went to after class and was like asking him about and he goes, oh, yeah, some people do think that institutions are important.
You don't say. There don't seem to be any humans in your model.
Yeah. So anyway, that was NYU was like a top 20, top 15 school at the time.
That's awesome. Well, Bob, I think this was very, very fun. I hope you and I aren't the only two people who think it was a very, very fun. Little stories from our lives that may or may not be instructive.
Yeah, I learned a lot about. No, I think that's a good spot to wrap up.
Wrap up with the macro. All right. Well, thank you, Bob. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think we have any show notes, but check out bobmurphyshow.com and check out HamanNature.com, HAMAN Nature, for all sorts of other stuff. And I'll catch you next week, Bob, and we'll catch you later on the crossovers.
So long,
see you
folks.
Bye.
You've just experienced another episode of The Bob Murphy Show, the podcast promoting free markets, free minds, and grateful souls. For more information and to subscribe to this podcast, visit bobmurphyshow.com.